Hello and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host, Anna, and today is a very special episode, mostly because I get to talk to two gentlemen who are from my neck of the woods. I am talking to N.L. Lavin and Hunter Burke. They're the co-authors of their debut novel Of Flesh and Blood, which is out today from Crooked Lane Books. And they're from Louisiana. They are from South Louisiana. They are Cajun. They're from the Lafayette area. And while I'm from a little bit more east of there, we have a lot in common, as I'm sure you can tell by our conversation. We talk about their writing process, what it's like to co-write a book with somebody, and in particular, in Hunter and in Elle's case, they are friends, so that was a really cool conversation to have. And then, of course, we get into Cajun territory, Southern territory, talking about how big Louisiana culture is, especially within the context of Flesh and Blood, and just kind of how it's shaped all of our lives and especially their writing. It's a really, really cool conversation, and I'm very fortunate that they made the time to chat with me. I'm recording this intro after going to their book event this last weekend in Lafayette, Louisiana, which was a super cool event. There were so many friends and family there to support both NL and Hunter, and it was just super awesome to see the community support them in this way. Not to mention, Of Flesh and Blood is a really freaking good book. I sound like I'm just biased at this point because they're local, but I genuinely love the book. I love where they took it. I love everything about it, how dark and twisty it is, the places it goes, the risks it takes. I think it's a really, really cool novel. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our very Cajun conversation. Hello, gentlemen. How are y'all?
Great.
We're doing great. We're waiting for the other to talk. It's going to be a running.
This is going to be
tonight.
the real hurdle to cross here. Yeah.
I have faith in y'all. Y'all seem very tight. So I am really, really pumped today because this is the closest I've ever been to interviewing anybody that I know locally for this podcast. You guys, okay, so I have Hunter Burke with me here today and NL Lavin. Hunter, if you want to say hello first so people recognize your voice, and then Mr. Lavin, if you want to say hello, people will recognize yours.
Right. So I'm going to talk in a very deep register. Now, this is Hunter Burke and in 11 sounds like this.
Hi, this is me. Yeah, I'm the other guy.
Perfect, perfect. And more importantly, y'all are both the author of a debut novel that's coming out this summer called Of Flesh and Blood. It's coming out with Crooked Lane Books. I've read it already and I adore it. I am a bit of a horror reader, but my roots are with crime fiction. So, I mean, this was like the book for me. I literally could not have dreamt of a better book. But to get started, let's go ahead and start with the obvious. We got to talk about the Louisiana background here. So how do
Yeah.
y'all know each other? Where are y'all from? We gotta unpack all that.
Right. Thanks, Doc. I'll take it from here. So I'm from Broussard, Louisiana, which is right outside of Lafayette. And I'm going to do the rest of the interview in my accent. So my mom's going to be real proud. No, I was born and raised in Broussard, Louisiana, which is a small little satellite town right outside of Lafayette, which is the Acadiana capital, so to speak. Yeah, born and raised, and spent most of my life. I went to the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, and I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting, which now props my door open. So I'm very excited to have that degree. It was a lovely, lovely time there, though. And Yeah, and then from there moved to New Orleans and spent a majority of my life in Louisiana until I moved to California, and now I live in Georgia.
Yeah, and I grew up in Lafayette. Moved away for a little while. I'm back in Lafayette now with my wife and kids. And Hunter and I met in Lafayette, going to high school together. We were in a really terrible cover band together in high school, and he was our lead singer, and I played guitar, and that's how this all started. A really bad Sublime cover band. Yeah.
Oh no shit, really?
Hey, we
Yeah.
also did 311
A lot of
covers.
311. Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't think it could get any better and it just did. I shit you
Yeah.
not. That's amazing.
Did you say better or did you say basic?
Oh no, better, far
Like,
better, far better. I can assure you. Okay, so I guess that's where the magic started.
Yeah.
So I have to ask about the process of co-authoring a book. What is that like? Because you see it every now and then with a few different people, and for instance, I know Daniel Kraus has picked up the manuscript from some older stuff that I think George Romero didn't finish, and he finished his books for him, and you can kind of tell the parts of who wrote what. But with you guys, it's really hard to tell. So I'm curious how you guys did this.
Right. So I did everything. NL did nothing. He was there to consult for a lot of the no, no. I think seriously, and I'm sure we'll dive into a lot of the history behind how we started all of this, but I think initially NL had this idea of kind of retrofitting a script that we had to fit in the novel format. And he was the one to kind of initiate how the structure was going to be, which was in the voice of this psychiatrist who started as Dr. Vincent Lavin, but eventually became Dr. Vincent Blackburn because they wanted to avoid confusion, which that makes a complete ton of sense. And so I believe NL was the first one to initiate what Vincent's voice was. And so then it became for me kind of learning how that structure was going to be put down. It was basically doing an impression or my best, because God knows NL is a better prose writer than I am. And God, I'm really outing myself here. And so it was emulating his style, the voice. And then oftentimes, and I would go back and like kind of mess with some of the verbiage that I had kind of put together to kind of make this cohesive voice. Did I get that right, Doc?
Yeah, I mean, especially if your narrator is a psychiatrist who lived in New Orleans and moves back to Lafayette, and full disclosure, has 37 Judy's first cousins, like our protagonist does, and like I do. A lot of it was rooted in kind of a pretty specific voice, so it helps to have that voice kind of go through it. And I think a lot of it was that back and forth, but then, we have all these different characters kind of coming in. And so, if there was a more Henri specific thing, it was kind of like, all right, Hunter, you've got Henri's voice down. And so you take that, and most of it bounces back and forth about 100 times before it ends up kind of coalescing into something that sounds like a little bit of both of us, maybe.
That makes
Right.
sense. Yeah, and the really cool thing about this book is I mean it's hard to not have such a strong sense of culture with this book. I mean, we have a book that is set in South Louisiana. I feel like it's something that we don't get that often. I'm going to be really honest. It's the kind of book that I look for and I reach for. But I'm going to go ahead and let one of you guys in a moment describe what the book's about. I'm too afraid to because I don't want to accidentally spoil anything. But I think what's really, really cool about this book is there is a very unique voice and a very like it just feels like home to me because a lot of the words that you guys use, a lot of the verbiage, the names, things like that, it's a very strong sense of style, place, all these things. It almost feels like a character to the book. But if anybody is not aware of what Flesh and Blood is about, do one of you want to take a stab at summarizing what the book is about?
He's passing it along to me, Jesus. So in very broad strokes, it's about a forensic psychiatrist who returns home to Louisiana to do a case study on a notorious serial killer 8 years prior in South Louisiana, and slowly discovers some unnerving ties that he has to this particular serial killer. And I don't think it's a spoiler because it's in the introduction that he ends up discovering that he's first cousins with this serial killer. And so much was made about this particular series of grisly killings in 2008 and 2009 that it kind of, both of his worlds meet in that he's charged with writing what do we call that? We call that
Case study.
help me, case study. Thank you. Yeah, wow, I'd be nowhere without you, buddy. Uh,
My co-author,
on
ladies and gentlemen.
right, yeah. Maybe one day I'll read this book. It sounds awesome. um, a case study on his cousin. And so the story kind of jumps back and forth to Vincent's examination of his cousin's psychosis, or so he thinks, and also bounces to the present time in Vincent, which is kind of around 2018, 2019, to when he's doing this research and also understanding how all of this fits into his present life. And that's yeah. that's what it's about. The twists start to come the further you get into it, and I don't want to spoil too much because I feel like that there might be some fun involved with that.
There is some fun involved in that, I can assure you. And so of course, I typically ask this of all the people that I talk to about, where was the first nugget? Where was the inspiration for this story rooted? How did this come to be? It's a big general blanket question, but if you guys just want to take off on any tangents that y'all want about how the story came to be, I would love to hear about it.
Oh boy, I'm gonna take that one because Hunter will go off on some tangents. So I it started actually. So I was in New Orleans in medical school when Hunter moved down there, and I'd been there for a little while. And he proposed. He was an actor, moving to New Orleans, and proposed the idea of writing a screenplay together. Um, we had both been co-best men in one of our good friends' weddings. And we wrote our toast together, and we really like as we were writing, oh man, we kind of like writing together. This is fun. And so, based on that alone, Hunter thought I might be able to write a screenplay with him, which is really stupid. And so we did it, and it was about game warden on the trail of this serial killer in South Louisiana, and we wrote that, and that was back what in 2010 maybe,
I,
um,
I'm like 2012, something like that. Yeah.
something in there. I was definitely still in med school, so it was around that time, 10 or 11, and we wrote that and kind of well, Hunter, you take it from there because you were involved with sort of like trying to actually go and do things with that after I was done helping you.
Right. So at the time we were, I had a group of friends who were filmmakers and we were destined to make this film into a movie. And little did we know how much it costs to make a movie and all that goes into it. And so the script we had written was we were probably out kicking our coverage on it. We needed way more money and we didn't have a lot of know-how. So we did in lieu of that, we kind of shelved that and NL and I decided to write a feature-length script that we could make. And so we ended up and Elle and I wrote that, and we made it on a shoestring budget, and it ended up premiering a couple of years later at the Tribeca Film Festival, and that was wonderful. It kind of galvanized Elle and I's relationship as far as it came to writing scripts together. And then let's see, in 2020, March 2020, we got invited to the Sundance Film Festival to pitch this movie that NL and I had written. I'm gonna get your name right.
Yeah.
Um, and we went to the Sundance Film Festival, pitched it, had a couple of bites. It was very exciting. And then we all kind of know what happened in 2020. Uh, I ended up moving back to Lafayette to be with my parents. My dad at the time was going through chemo for he was going through cancer at the time, and so it kind of brought me back to the community. I ended up going to NL's house one night and was kind of relaying the journey of where the script had gone, and Al looked at me and he said, "You know what? It might be a novel." And I said, "You are out of your damn mind. How the hell are we going to do that?" Um, and by the end of the night, we had had a couple of old fashions and decided that was probably the most prudent thing to do, considering either one of us hadn't written a novel. Although you had written something. You had written a like
I had
almost.
written a bad novel that no one ever wanted to make, and
There we go. There we go.
I had written some bad short stories that no one had really wanted to make, and I think I needed Hunter's help trying to figure out like how to make something a little bit more compelling, and using something that we had already kind of worked on together felt like a good start. And at the time, the original screenplay was really about this game warden and all of that. Looking at it again later on, now being a psychiatrist, having moved back to Lafayette, I was like, man, it would be really interesting to come at this old story we wrote from the perspective of a psychiatrist moving back to Lafayette, looking at some family ties to these events that we kind of already wrote about, and sort of presenting it as this case study. And so we kind of took off from there.
That's that's a hell of a journey, one.
Yeah, it was very long.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do love that the story persisted through all of that. All the way from 2020, whenever, or 2012 to now. That's a really cool thing. And I do love that it has that kind of like personal flair to match kind of where you guys were of, returning home at this time and re-examining the lens through which we view the story. And that kind of brings me to my next question about genre. And I'm somebody who's like, I understand the role that genre plays whenever you pick up a book because you kind of need to know what you're getting yourself into, right? But at the same time, I love whenever a book can walk the line and be multiple different things. So whenever I was reading this, I was like, oh, this is pretty straightforward crime thriller. And then the further we got, I was like, oh no, this is more my bread and butter. This is more horror. And I really, really loved the places that you guys went with it. Was that an intentional choice? Is that just where the story went? And like, what is y'all's opinion on genre? Like, do y'all think it's important and how did it inform the writing process, you know?
We thought we could reinvent the wheel, not ever having written a novel before. And so before starting with a very basic idea, we were like, why don't we start with something really complicated and try to like trick our reader and like really pull them in with something interesting that they've never seen before. Little did we know that was going to be a very complicated process in selling and pitching the book. But at the same time, I don't think we would have changed anything about it because I think more than anything, we wanted to be entertained by what we were writing. Like in the current space we were writing, but also later, like when we were going back and reading it. So that's always been kind of the impetus behind writing between the two of us is we just wanted to like entertain the other. And so we couldn't help but do something stupid and different. And as a result, I think genre started to get twisted and was intentionally twisted because that was something that we were kind of interested in. Little did we know that was something that was going to be harder and more complicated to pin down for people who were interested in buying the book or potentially uh, reading the book. But it's great to hear that you got excited by it. And certainly, we aren't the first people to do this. Um, but yeah, it was exciting because it actually started because NL brought an idea of how to format the script,
Mhm.
which was originally the script was kind of a, I wouldn't say creature feature, but you know, a game warden in the swamp, you know, hunting a serial killer that may not be something out of Louisiana folklore. And the way that NL approached me was, you know, at the time he had just read, I think, a book called The Monster of Florence. Is that right, NL? You want to take that one?
Yeah, I can't remember the time frame of it when I read Monster of Florence, or if that was like after I'd been getting really into In Cold Blood and I'll Be Gone in the Dark, and I was reading all these like true crime stories that were I was just so excited about the idea of using something like a true crime format to tell the story of a place, the way that Monster of Florence told the history of these Florentines coming in and thinking about, all right, well, I'm back in Lafayette now. I'm kind of re-examining my roots here and what it means to be from this place after having spent some time away. And it just felt like this really interesting way to start talking about the people that we grew up around over here. And then after doing that for a little while, it kind of became, I don't know if it was more interesting or just sort of a personal challenge that we threw at each other to say, all right, well, what if you went from true crime into a mystery novel, and then you start to get more and more horror as you get into the third act, and how do we kind of make that feel progressive and propulsive as you move forward? And so that was kind of, I think, the original goal there.
Yeah, and I think if I could comp A Flesh and Blood to any novel that I've previously read, it would probably be Richard Chizmar's Chasing the Boogeyman.
Right.
And I adore what he did with that whole premise because you know it felt very coming of age, you know, because it was he is the main character even though you know it's still fictional. And it very much happened with you guys where there were certain things I'm like, shit, I don't know if that really happened or not. I need to go look it up. You know what I
Well, early
mean?
on, it's funny, early on, we had to do a book proposal to pitch to potential agents. And one of the comps that we had was Richard's book. And so I had a chance to sit down and read it. And I was like, this is amazing. This is like if Michael Myers like really happened, like what would be the situational true crime of it all? And I was blown away. And I was also kind of scared because I was like, I think he beat us to it. It was kind of like that Brian Wilson moment where he's sitting back and listening to Sergeant Pepper's. And I was like, oh no, they've already done it. He's already done it. And I don't know, he still may have because that book is really fun. And we're just coming along with that sounds, I don't know, that sounds highfalutin. I'm gonna kick that back.
No, no, I totally get what you're putting down with that because I think it's the same idea, I think, but it's executed in two wildly different ways because you know, for me, whenever I read Chismore's book, it very much reads like King's It, like in terms of the coming of age and reckoning with childhood and stuff like that. And then almost conversely, I feel like A Flesh and Blood is like coming to terms with adulthood and responsibility and rivaling with, oh shit, like these are the ties that bind, but what does that mean for me and my family? And when do I let go? Do I ever let go? And I really, really enjoyed it's almost like two ends of the spectrum on that, like one's the beginning and one's the end. Or not the end, but a little bit farther down the
Right.
line. Um, and then the other I'm a big nerd and I love the X-Files. And there's something about this book that reads
Yeah.
very much like, if Mulder and Scully just got dropped in Broussard, Louisiana, that this is probably what it would look like. You know what I mean?
Now
That's
that
awesome.
sounds like a great season of the X-Files.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my mom
Cool.
is somewhere right now, like her ears are ringing. She used to make me watch that show with her all the time. So she is psyched that that is the comparison.
Oh, perfect. That's what we love to hear. Well, so that kind of covers genre and everything. And then, of course, I have to ask, whenever you write about Louisiana, sometimes, I have friends that live out of state or in different parts of the country. And I'll either say something and I'm not thinking about it, or I reference something and they're like, what the hell did you just say? What are you talking about? What did you mean? Did you ever have that problem when you were writing, like when you were editing and you turned something in and they were like, what is this? What the hell are you talking about?"
A lot of Uncle Mitch's dialogue. So uh, that we had to really, really be like, we're no, like these weren't mistakes. This is really how this guy would say this, and that became a real like banging our heads against the wall, trying to figure out like how do we make this make sense.
I think
Um,
early on when NL and I were writing the script of this, one of the things we picked out for Uncle Mitch was that he has a word of the day calendar on his desk that he like tears off occasionally, but he won't remember the entire word. He'll remember fragments of it and he'll start to substitute parts for it. So that rule kind of stuck to the novel.
Yeah, which was
Because
something that was like so specific. I mean, I've grown up around so many Cajun men out there who use the biggest words of anyone I know, and half the time they are dead on, and half the time it sounds like they're just pulling them out of a hat. And I just love that feeling of um, there's this loquaciousness to the way that they talk and the way that they tell their stories that is so engrossing and really captivates you. So that was like a to me a big challenge of kind of honoring that kind of person and making it feel real. But a lot of the stuff that they say is kind of you know colloquialisms for the folks down here that I don't know if I've been here for so long now. I kind of forget like what is and what isn't specific to us down here. And I'm kind of like, just go with it. I don't know.
yeah.
We'll just throw it in there and see what happens.
It's
I think
like get when you get down at the store, like that's something people are like,
yeah.
you're gonna get down. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I ran into that before, and I think my favorite thing that I call it in a Flesh and Blood is Uncle Mitch, and he says naked, like you, and
Right.
y'all spelled it the way, and I just like had to die for a minute because when I text my dad, that is how he texts, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, this is authenticity, like spelled out right here for you. Oh, it was
We had a
such a
list
joy.
of we had a list of all of his sayings, and I think NL still has this running list of things
Still
that
have
like
my
kind of
phone. Yeah,
he had
we
that
didn't
like he
we
could
didn't use them
play.
all, so
We didn't use them all, so if we got a part two, we're gonna dive right in. But it was really fun to write for that character. I think the more interesting stuff was like writing for Yvette, who has a very specific voice because she grew up in St. Landry Parish in the
Yeah.
Opelousas area, and then also trying to find Vincent, who is a kind of a he moves away to Indiana and then he comes back. So trying to find the way that he would phrase and say things. This came up in doing the audiobook too. I had the pleasure and fortune to do Vincent's narration for our audiobook. And some of the words that I would say, our director was like, I don't think that's how you say that. And I was like, you're right. And also, he would say it like this. Or, like, a good example is the college in Baton Rouge. So,
Yeah.
people in South Louisiana say LSU. Um, and they came back and they said, it's LSU. And I was like, that's actually not how we say it.
No, it's all
Uh,
one fluid.
it's LSU. And as a result, I had recorded Vincent saying LSU, and then they were like, "You need to record that." I was like, "Actually, you're right. I do need to re-record that because Vincent would not say LSU. He would say LSU because he's been gone for so long."
It's so crazy how those things play out, man. And like you don't ever really realize it until it comes down to something like this, like until you move away and you come back, it's really really insane. But I really one thing that I do really enjoy about Vincent's character is the fact that he was so clinically presented, right? You know, we start off the novel, and y'all talked a little bit about this already, so I kind of want to hit on it again just because I thought it was really interesting. You know, it's a very clinical presentation when we meet him. And the further we go, I find the more I don't it's not unhinged and it's not insane. It's just, you know, the grips on reality seem to be faltering a little bit, and it's not we're not reading a case study anymore. And that felt very, very intentional. What was that like that tone shift like for y'all? And again, y'all kind of spoke to this already whenever y'all spoke about co-authoring this, but still, it feels like a really big part of the book, so I wanted to give y'all space to discuss that.
Yeah, it's funny because I think my original pitch to Hunter was actually just to say like, oh, what if we just did it all through case study? And you told this whole story through case study, and we tried it for a little while, or I don't even think he let me entertain that idea for very long before we realized like, oh no, we could maybe actually have some narration going on here. I think honestly, I presented that to him because I had written so many bad short stories. I was like, I'm not a good writer, but I know how to write a dry case study. I read them all the time. I read medical journals for a living, so I know this stuff, and I know that we could write that, and we could maybe make that interesting. And he kind of pushed me, say like, yeah, but we can write well, and we can come up with more interesting and colorful ways of talking about this. And so the further we got into that, I think Vincent started to get his own voice that wasn't just Dr. Blackburn's voice anymore. And the further we went with that, it started to be like, okay, well, what if you got really into this? And he got very excited about what he was doing. And then what does that start to do to a person? And when there is such a personal connection to a story like this, how does that start to really flavor what happens as he's telling this story? And so it was just kind of a progression, I think, as we moved into it deeper and deeper.
Yeah, we would get to certain parts where it was Edward Harper, who's a character in the story. It would be his like case reports, and I would just leave it to NL. I was like, we have to write what happened in the crime scene. Go for it. And then I'd go back and read it and be like, wow, this is clinically boring as hell, but this is amazing. This is so specific. This feels so real.
Yeah, no, it's a unique balance to be able to, I think, give that kind of authenticity to the clinical side of it, especially given his profession, and then also, you know, the personal ties. And I think that you guys accomplished that by diving into all these different characters' points of view, you know, like being able to see everything that's happening around town through everybody else is really, really cool. And there's something really unique about, to me, I've always thought, you know, the swamp, the bayou, anytime we're out fishing or hunting with like with my dad, I'm like, this is a great place for a dead body. And I don't know why there is not more Cajun horror or like Cajun crime. Like, why is that? Because I don't know about you guys, but I mean, it's a terrifying place in my mind. Like, I just don't understand why we're not doing more of this.
I mean, just the fact alone that I would challenge anyone to find a body of water around here that you can see more than 1 inch into. Is just like, what is here? Yeah, I agree. I don't. I think there's so much potential for that kind of thing. I don't know.
I mean, the reality kind of speaks for itself too. Louisiana's had its share of le legit realistic trouble over the years. There was a documentary a couple of years ago about these sex workers that were being murdered in, I think it was West Louisiana, Southwest Louisiana, closer to Lake Charles, and I mean, which kind of became the basis for True Detective, kind of not. I don't know how much Nick Pizzolatto was basing on that, but he's from that area, so I think he was probably around it. But it does have this, like, NL and I are about to write about this. It does have this sense of isolation and remoteness to it that kind of offers this spookiness, but at the same time, it has a lot of these old world archaic beliefs. The folklore here is still pretty palpable, despite like there being a pervasive Catholic faith throughout. Those two kind of factions don't go to war with each other, but there is this belief system in place that people are kind of more readily uh, willing to accept things that are stranger than fiction. And so you have this kind of criminal element that exists because of this like lawlessness and also this like corruptness within the police department oftentimes. And at the same time, you have this like bevy of folklore and these kind of old-fashioned beliefs at mix. And it's kind of this gumbo for the perfect horror thriller setting that I think Louisiana, at least South Louisiana, I won't speak for the folks that are above Opelousas. I don't know, that might as well be Texas. But I won't speak for them, but it certainly lends itself to like this really fertile territory for these stories to exist. And I think that's something NL and I have always been fascinated by. And when they do it, it's either you either get the Water Boy, which is really funny but really terrible, or you get True Detective, which is this really interesting study in a place that also feels like it could be set in West Texas, like it has that kind of feel to it. So I think more than anything, NL and I were interested in like grounding it in the reality that we found growing up in South Louisiana, which is this Cajun and Creole culture that existed when, we were on the weekends and we would go to tailgates and go to field parties and mud riding. And a lot of these personalities that we came into contact with, I hate to date us, but damn near 20 years ago. Um, and so as a result, we know a lot of people.
I think I already
Oh,
dated us when I said we were in a Sublime and 311 cover band in high
oh
school.
yeah,
So
you're right.
I think the jig is up. We're
Coming
old.
for us. We
Yeah.
old.
No.
So all of that just kind of felt like a really interesting place to put all of this story that we had. And I don't know. I don't think it's the Louisiana story. I think it's, our version of what we were excited about talking about. Um, but I think we also grew up with really great writers writing about Louisiana that kind of nurtured in us a curiosity about the world kind of in South Louisiana that was being broadcast to the world.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in some ways, we talked a little bit about how, our culture and our slang and some of the things that we say are kind of inclusive and exclusive. It's inclusive for us because we're like, oh, hey, it's real for us. But then whenever it gets out to other people, it feels exclusive. And I think that kind of creates a unique dynamic, right? Like you really never really know what's going on down there because people don't understand or they don't know. And I think that that kind of mystery gives a lot of room for the unknown. And we have some crazy ass folklore down here. I mean, our family had horses, and I'll never forget, we would go to pick them up out the pasture, and their mane would be all messed up, and they're like, oh, that's the lutin, they're braiding their mane, the ghost that stays out there, they're braiding their manes or whatever. Like every little
Yeah.
story, there's
Yeah.
there's some ghost story or some boogeyman down here that can explain away whatever. So I think I would love to see more of what you guys are doing set here, because I just think that, like you said, it may not be the Louisiana story, but it's y'all's Louisiana story, and I think that there's a lot of room to play with what's down here.
Yeah.
Right. That's great. I mean, it's awesome that you had that experience because it was that like, those morality tales growing up. That's what a lot of the folklore for us I was used for. It's like you better behave or this Rougarou is going to come and get you. And it's like and they show you a picture and they tell you what it looks like and that is horrifying as a 5-year-old. Of course I'm going to put my clothes away and do my chores because I don't want that thing anywhere near us. One of the interesting things about those types of folklore in South Louisiana is it's like equal parts terrifying, but also like comical because there's like bends to some of this stuff, like with the Rougarou. It's like the Rougarou, if you put a screen door on your front door, it won't enter because it can't count past 10. So like it's counting the holes for whatever reason that's happening. It'll stop before it enters to count the holes. And then it keeps losing track of how because it can't count past 10. And even trying to explain that sounds bonkers, but that's the kind of like frivolousness of the folklore that exists paired with the, gonna eat your guts if you don't put your clothes away.
Well, not only that, but it's the specificity of it too. I mean, like I will not forget our Raising Cane's in home. I'm from Homa. We had a Nutriman poster. Like instead of Swamp Thing, there was a Nutriman poster. So I mean, it was just it's just that you just kind of it's everywhere you look without even realizing it.
Right.
And so I don't know. It's so rich. It's just so rich, and it just makes me so excited whenever I find people who get it because that's where the creativity happens is whenever you have things like this to mess around with. But yeah, so to bring it all kind of back to Of Flesh and Blood, the ending, I feel like you can kind of take it or leave it. You can decide on what side of, where you want to believe what happens. How did you guys land on the ending? I imagine that that's an interesting place to land. You can either point blank go there for it. You can say, we're gonna let the reader decide, or you can go the exact opposite direction. So without giving it away, this is very hard to do. I want to talk a little bit about the ending if we can.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Without giving too much away, I would say, if nothing else, at the time when I was reading so much of that true crime, which I loved, and I loved the way that it could tell these stories. Almost every time I got to the end, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, we don't get a good resolution. And so I told them, like, we get to write an ending for it. We can make this happen. We can have our character kind of spiral out a little bit and do some things that a responsible human being would not do, and really dive into it. I don't remember how we came to our ending, though. I think it took a few tries, but yeah.
Right. I think I had so NL and I have these two kind of, which I think makes us like good pair, a good writing partners, because I have this sensibility that is often, larger than life, and I think very in terms of plot, and I like to make things uh, inflated and kind of grandiose in a way that can come unmoored if not tethered. And NL is that tether, and so oftentimes I would have these ideas of like, oh, it's a chase, and then he's going through the woods, and then this happens. And then he would be like, well, like we're kind of losing sight of the character here. We really need to figure this out. And so we kind of were able to cheat with the ending because I got to have my ending, and then he also got to have his ending. Um, in the sense, God, I really, it's so hard not to spoil this. In the sense that we got the chase in the woods, and then we also got the reality of like of what the thing is when you finally face it. Um, so we have this really awesome set piece in the towards the end of the book that takes place in the woods that I'm absolutely in love with, and it was such a visual experience to write and to work with NL on this, to have all of these details, and then there's kind of a denouement to that felt more justified in what we had set the book up with, which was this pursuit of answers at the cost of everything, and what one person, namely Vincent, will do to get those answers, and that the reality of the horror that he thinks he's ready for is not the one that he actually is faced with uh, towards the end. God, this is so ambiguous, but
You're
that
walking
it
a
was
good
a
line, though. You're doing it, Hunter.
I was about to
yeah,
I'm
say you're
proud of
doing a
you.
great job
it
there.
was a really rewarding experience to like have both of those two ideas at work, to have the grandiose ending and to have that more cerebral. I think one of the touch points we often talk in terms of movies, which God, we're such bad writers, was the scene in Zodiac when Jake Gyllenhaal is at the end. He's going to see about the guy that might be the killer, and he goes down into the basement. He's like, "You have a basement in California? There's no basement in California." And so it goes down, and that whole like goosebump-inducing scene that follows when he goes into that basement was something that NL was like, I think that's like the trigger for what that could be. That is the denouement to that scene in the woods. Um, so yeah, we both got to have our really fun endings that way.
Well, it worked very well for me. I can say that much. And
Nice.
it was a lot of tense writing. There were a couple of scenes that I was sitting on the edge of my seat for. We talk about how clinical the book starts out, but I can assure you it doesn't stay that way for very long. No, it's some very tense, it's some frightening writing. And like I said, I just really, really enjoyed it. And so I'm going to throw out a little bit of a fun question now, kind of a free for all, but what would you say, other than, we talked about Richard Chizmar's chasing the boogeyman, kind of like Michael Myers and things like that, but what would y'all say some of your horror influences are? We talked a little bit about the true crime aspect of this, like with I'll Be Gone in the Dark and Cold Blood and stuff like that, but what about horror? Like, what do you guys look for in horror that, may have translated to this novel?
I think the basis of this starts with like horror movies, right? Because I feel like
Mhm.
that was the easiest the exposure that we had early on, and so just kind of developing those ideas in terms of visuals and getting excited about that. But I think the further we got into it, I mean, this is such a tried and true answer, and it's so boring. But Stephen King is
Oh,
obviously the one that like figures that out for a lot of people. He figured it out for me. I think the first time I read Salem's Lot, I
mhm.
was like, this is there's and this gets cited a lot, but the scene where they have to bring the coffin down into the basement of the house, of the Marsden house, it's hair raising. That like I still go back to that and just astounded by what he's able to do. I think between that and was it Richard Matheson, the Hell House book, which
Yeah.
was just such a surprise and frightening and like sexual in a way that I was like, oh, something can be like horny and scary. Like I had no idea that was the case. And as a result, I was like, my mind was blown. I think even Matheson's other book, that the Omega Man, it's I Am Legend, that
Mhm.
has such like a specific interesting thing going on that's like so character based that you can't, I don't know if you can do in a movie because they're, you just want set pieces in a movie, but like the novel is so awesome because it has such interiority to that character. Um, I don't know. I feel like if those were the three centerpieces, that really kind of kick-started. And now I can't stop reading horror. I'm in the middle of and I can't remember Augustina
Oh yeah.
Bastedica's
Mhm.
the Unworthy, and I mean that is
That one's
unnerving. I just finished.
brutal. Whew.
Oh, it's not a fun place to be, but it's effective.
No.
And then I just finished before that Buffalo Hunter, which I was telling NL about. I mean,
I just
it's
started it last night because of that.
It's
yeah,
so
it's
I'm
good.
excited
really
about
cool.
it.
I, and I remember reading what was it? I mean, he's written so many novels at this point, but The Only Good Indian, is
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
the yeah, that blew my mind. I was like, I didn't know horror could do this. Like, I didn't know you could do this in a novel. So I think those are probably my steadfast champions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at some point you sent me, you remember, it must have been while we were working on this because you sent me Silence of the Lambs and I went back and had read Red Dragon right before that, but especially Silence of the Lambs. Um, I guess both of them really. I mean, the way that they interweave mental health and horror and even though, psychiatrists
Tough
get a
beat.
pretty bad
Tough
rap,
beat.
tough beat with old Hannibal. So I might have my bones to pick there, but so good. Like, just I love the way that those just like kind of get their claws into your brain a little bit and into your um, psychic makeup. And it's just a lot of fun there. So yeah, those have been a lot of fun to kind of reference back to.
One of the really fun things too has been NL. One of his favorite writers is Kurt Vonnegut, and like
Mhm.
finding ways to incorporate non-horror authors. And we also like really we love Ted Chiang. He writes short stories about sci-fi and like finding ways to incorporate not, genre that is different to this into the writing. Incredibly hard to try to emulate their styles, but I think very challenging and rewarding because we kind of attempt to spin the paradigm, even though God knows we shouldn't be doing that. We should just be trying to do the thing that it is. Um, but I feel like between those two examples, having the opportunity to try to reframe some of our understanding of what horror is and figure out what makes us scared, um, it's been a journey, a challenge, and very rewarding. And I think we're both looking forward to continuing doing it because I don't think neither of us feels like we really kind of hit the nail on the head.
I think you point out a really good thing. And I literally, like hours ago, I had this conversation with some friends about Stephen Graham Jones's stuff. And the same thing goes for like Daniel Kraus. I don't know if y'all have read anything from him, but him and Stephen Graham Jones are kind of on the same wavelength. Of they write very, it's not quite literary horror, but it walks the line of very genre specific and literary horror. And I think it's because a lot of these authors are so well read and they bring in the different textures of these other genres like you guys were talking about. And I think if we're going to keep the genre moving and keeping it, and being as hot as it is right now and evolving it, then that's what we got to do. And I'm all for it because I think it just adds a different layer, dimension, texture, whatever you want to call it, to this kind of storytelling. Um, and there are certainly parts of Flesh and Blood that you can point to that's like, oh, that's true crime. Oh, that's more, murder mystery. That's definitely horror. And a lot of it is just kind of like small town gossip. Like it is just that folksy
Right.
kind of, I, it's hard for me to think of an author off the top of my head that I can think of, but it has that kind of gritty, juicy, small town folk
I mean,
fiction.
we're ripping off Truman Capote with that. I mean, In Cold Blood was like a source text that NL early on was like, you have to read this. I think we read it in high school, and we didn't care about it then because we're just punk kids trying to get drunk and do stupid stuff.
Play 311
But
songs.
and play 311 songs, yeah.
Get
But
off my
like
case,
in
mom. Yeah.
that's right. in rereading it, like it's truly incredible work, and it's poetic, and God knows Truman or the literary world doesn't need me espousing how great that is, but it certainly served as a great guidepost for how, and like Inel was saying, how we can construct a story about our hometown, and kind of traversing that territory without it becoming just kind of a travel documentary, which we were in danger of pretty early on,
Yeah.
a travel log.
It's hard not to though. Like when I think about it,
Right.
if I were to like try and sit down and describe this place to someone, I would just want to list off all the quirks and the unique things and the hallmarks and the weird tradition. Like it's a hard thing to pull off with somewhere as unique as here. So no, I totally get it, but I am thrilled for you guys. I know that you have talked about having other ambitions, but I really do love this novel, mostly just because of all that you accomplished with it. It manages to do a lot of things. Like I said, it kind of gives us like an end cap to it's not coming of age, it's more like wrestling with responsibility and adulthood. It's dark. We didn't even really talk about the cannibalism part of this whole thing, but there is that if you want it. I mean, it's freaky, it's tense, there's so much going for it, and I really, really adored it. But what does the rest of 2025 look for you guys? So I know that y'all are promoting the book, and the book is coming out in June, but are y'all working on anything else? Can y'all talk about anything? Like, what's it look like here on out?
Okay, he's giving me the signal. Um, yeah, we are working on another novel. I think we both found the process really fascinating. It's a truly an execution of art that can be done. I think in the way we do it, it's really fun because it's a collaboration. I would love to talk to a sole artist, like a single artist, and pick their brain about like the kind of the excitement they get out of it. But I love the ability to collaborate with someone. I think as an actor, that's part and parcel of what I started to do, and how I do it. But we are working on a new novel, and I think to your point, we wanted to kind of stick locally. So we're we did live in New Orleans for an extended period of time, and so I think one of the things that interested us was trying to do something because there's like a plethora of stories about New Orleans. I think we wanted to kind of explore if we were to tell a story about New Orleans, what would that be? And like a Flesh and Blood, we're, examining things in our lives that are going on, that relationships and how those kind of entwine in a way that I think New Orleans kind of presents itself as the best place to put this. And then still experimenting with genre to kind of to ground it in some sort. I say ground it. That's the opposite of what it's doing, but to establish it in something that's really fun and exciting, and is
How to
ultimately telling.
levitate it is
Yeah,
more.
there we go. There we go. It's ultimately an exciting experience because we get to have the dumb thoughts that we do and put those down, but also do it in the sense of it's in the world of supernatural, and I think that's another fun thing too. In this novel that we're working on, we get to lean more into that genre and to have something more out and out that feels not having to dance around it in a way that a Flesh and Blood was kind of a puzzle to kind of keep it hidden, but also keep it at the forefront. Um, yeah, anything to add to that, Doc?
No, I mean just that and promoting this book and
Right.
our actual jobs too. And I've got some kids upstairs who are finally asleep, and yeah,
Go wake them
we
up.
got some things going on. There's always something going on over here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I don't think life ever slows down, but no, that's really exciting to hear. And like I've always kind of, whenever I started thinking about Louisiana horror, I used to kind of shy away from New Orleans horror because I'm like everybody sets, stuff in New Orleans. But the older that I've gotten, the more I have an appreciation for it because it's more of that historical horror that you can lean on to sometimes. And it's still so, so rich. I don't know if it's just because I've been able to spend more time there that I'm able to get more of an appreciation out of it, but no, I think that there's just so much that you can pick up and run with in that city. I mean, we were walking back from Jazz Fest and they literally have a sign advertising a cemetery next to the fairgrounds. Listen to Jazz Fest for Eternity in your resting place. I mean, I don't think anywhere else in the country has that. So I
It's
mean,
true. It's
Yeah.
such a city that is so open to the afterlife, and that whole experience just feels like it's like you're saying, it's comical, it's fun, and it's so ingrained in the culture that it's like this is a no-brainer. Like this is obviously like a fertile playground for any author to run through, and like you said, Anne Rice has done it to an incredible degree, and it's like, all right, well, There's still room left on the bone, I guess.
Oh,
Oh
there's
man, that was
plenty.
grim. That's a cannibal joke. Um, no, but in that same way, I think it was really fun to kind of examine Lafayette in a way that's like Lafayette is not haunted and it doesn't have, I mean, it's haunted in other ways, but it doesn't have that like paranormal side to it. So it was nice.
Great. Well, I'm over the moon for you guys. I'm really excited for this book's release, which is coming out on June 10th. Am I correct? Did I get that date right? Yep.
Right.
Okay. June
Yeah.
10th from Crooked Lane Books. Is there anything that we did not talk about that you guys wanted to mention before we sign off?
If you're in the Lafayette area, we're having a release party on June 7th. But
Yeah,
that's about it. That's all I got.
that's good. Look at him go. Oh
Yeah.
man, he's accustomed to this now. It's great. He's doing well. Um,
Perfect.
No, yeah, and read Louisiana literatures. There's so many great authors that have come out of here that are doing fiction and nonfiction work. The culture is so rich, and certainly we try to tap into a lot of different things. But there are great writers that are out there that are doing the very specific work about Creole culture and about Cajun culture and about just the history of the place. And uh, some of the most interesting stuff that we did, I think, was like the kind of journey into the Chitimacha tribe in South Louisiana, and I feel like that's something that is never covered. So if you're listening to this, go read about the Chitimacha tribe because it's pretty amazing stuff. Um, yeah, like continue your let a flesh and blood be your entryway into South Louisiana culture because while we think we got everything right, I'm sure we didn't, and it should just lead you to do your own research. Yeah, that's probably not great.
Those are dangerous words.
I do my own research, right, Doc?
Yeah.
I mean, we do have a doctor on the call.
That's right. Yeah,
Thank you
it's
guys
true.
so much. This has been such a treat. And like I said, I've just been so thrilled that I get the chance to talk to you guys and that this is kind of like a local read for me and I've been able to, get my hands on
Well,
it. So
Anna,
thank y'all.
we waited this long, but like you said Homa, right?
Yeah, Homa America.
Okay. You grew up Homa,
I
America.
did. My
That's
mom is
great.
from Chauvin. My dad's
Yeah.
from Homa. And then, yeah, we have people all down Chauvin, Burke and, surrounding
Because
area.
it's like Cajun separated by the Mississippi, which is crazy
Yeah.
because I met a bunch of Homa folk when I moved to New Orleans, and I was like, we have the same accent, but we are separated like geographically by a couple hundred miles.
Yeah.
Incredible. You guys have boiled crawfish. You guys have all that. Like it's the same. Yeah, we're just across the way. You guys have like probably better sausage than we do because I feel like the Italian influence kind of cuts closer there. Is that right?
I mean, I think it's pretty good. I mean, but
Yeah.
who's to say? I mean, who's to say? But yeah, no, I really can't complain about our food or anything like that. And we do have a lot of people that end up in New Orleans because of like with the oil field and all that. Like a lot of people who work in
Right.
the city, and then like they come, like stay in home or if they have spouses that work in the oil field and stuff like that. So we get a good mix of folks.
How do you like your gumbo? What's your ideal gumbo scenario?
Oh, well, okay,
Chicken and
so.
sausage, seafood,
Yeah,
dessert.
chicken and sausage, but like it's got to be a really dark roux.
There you go.
We just got so this is like such an odd flex, but we just got my great aunt gave us like her big Magnolite pot that she doesn't use
Oh, come
anymore,
on,
like the
Yeah.
big
bruh.
roaster. Yeah, yeah.
There you
And
go.
so
Now you're
like
cooking.
Man.
specifically gumbo from that pot is like chef's kiss, like
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
the best one.
I I
Yeah.
just I just inherited my grandmother's Magna and I'm just so excited about it. You're right. It's the best.
Yeah, there's nothing like, and it has to be like from your family, like, or it has to be
Yep.
from somebody Like you can't just go get like I know that there's companies now who are making replica Magnolites because I know that the originals are not around, but it's just there's something special about it. I don't know, man. I
Yeah,
don't know
right.
what kind
Yeah.
of Cajun magic's in that, but there's something to
Yeah.
it. Oh, all right, guys. Well, thank y'all so much. And A Flesh and Blood is out on June 10th from Crooked Lane Books. I will talk to you guys soon. Thank y'all.
Yes.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Anna.
Anna.
Once again, all of the thanks to Hunter and NL for their time. their kindness, their fantastic personalities, their Cajun knowledge, their willingness to answer all of my questions and just talk everything of flesh and blood related. I really love this novel as somebody who kind of cut her teeth reading crime novels and thriller novels. This book certainly caters to fans of those genres, but as it goes, it mingles more into horror territory, and it just feels like a book after my own heart. I mean, if there was ever a novel written for me, it may just be this one. I am such a fan of it. It touches on so many cultural, touchstones for me, and so many like colloquialisms and just like little niche things that make me feel so seen as a Cajun and also a thriller fan and a horror fan. I think it's just a magnificent book, and I just implore everybody to go out and pick it up, give it a try. Like I said, it starts out in kind of like this thriller, mystery territory, crime procedural territory. But if you're a horror fan, and I know I do mostly talk about horror on this podcast, there will be something for you by the end of it. Worry not. I can assure you. So, once again, Of Flesh and Blood is on shelves today. Today is June 10th. It is being published by Crooked Lane Books, and again, Hunter, Burke, and NL Lavin are co authors. They are wonderful gentlemen. And yeah, thank you all for listening once again. Just a friendly reminder, I'm probably going to be taking next week off from the podcast. I will be returning from StokerCon. So I am anticipating that I will be very tired and maybe a little jet lag. So I'll hopefully be returning in the coming weeks with some new episodes about summer releases, and what a time it is to be reading horror. I think I'm kind of contemplating doing a recap of some of my favorite reads from the beginning of this year. We just have such a wealth of books and stories right now. It's truly a magnificent time to be a horror fan. I'm always saying that, but it feels especially true now. Thanks so much, guys, for listening, promoting, shouting me out, all that you do. If you ever have any questions or you want to drop me a line, you can always DM me, email me, Anna at annarosereads.com. Yeah, and if you are going to Stoker and you see me, come say hi. I promise I am friendly. I already bought a bunch of candy and I'll have liquid IV on me and Advil. And yeah, I'm prepared for just about anything. Thanks, you guys. I hope that you all have a wonderful week. And until